that interesting to me. I was about to go to sleep and this just woke me up. Another comment says, wow, this 1 hour discussion explains a lot. I really think it was very, very valuable. That's why I played it, the whole thing. I wasn't really intended on playing the whole thing, but I couldn't find a stopping point. Let me read some more. It says, in the USA, there are 4 official independent branches of government. Over time, the national security state has not been held in check by the other 3 branches of government. In 1989, the U.S. Congress, by 1 vote, formed a second collateral government, the National Security State. The primary objective of unelected national security state is to influence both overtly and covertly world nations. Some might refer to this as world hegemony. Shortly thereafter, the Supreme Court affirmed or ratified its formation, voted 5-4. Ironically, the Chief Justice on that case forged the Plessy versus Ferguson case, a case that essentially said some people are more valuable, more protected, and have more rights than others. Therefore, it was not a large stretch for this Chief Justice in this case to concede that some countries were worth more than others. Over the years, the democratically elected government has always deferred to the national security state. So when investigating the Contra cocaine train, the national security state overruled prosecution. Some of the matters of Epstein, Maxwell, making available the many black books, hard drives, and government-run pedophiles train, etc. In 1992, Congress unanimously made a law that ordered that all CIA and NSA documentation on the JFK assassination be made available and unredacted. Despite this being law created by the elected branch of government, the national security state refuses to give them up. As always, the elected branch of government deferred to national security state. Trump sided with the national security state, as did Biden. Therefore, laws are below national security state interests. The primary objective of most government is to sell gratuities to the highest bidder. The practice shapes the country's growth and culture, typically for the worst where the common man is concerned. The Constitution precisely limits the size of central government. In summary, the Constitution states that unless express and specific permission is given in the Constitution by law, the central government cannot do it. According to the Constitution, the U.S. was a confederation of cooperating states, and state government local deciders were able to be the primary goalkeepers. The central federal government by this Constitution was vastly limited in power. What exists today, and as it existed in the 1860s, is an illegal rise in power and prerogatives by the central federal government. Legally, this gives states the right to file for breach of contract and to succeed. But we know what happened when a few of them did. Things have been moving downhill and an even accelerating pace ever since. The other fundamental flaw is that that contrary to the Constitution, the central government turned over the creation of money to private bankers. When you couple this illegal, immoral practice with politicians selling gratuities, you wind up with bad things like endless wars, a huge financial boon to the bankers who counterfeit money, then loan it to the big central federal government to prosecute their wars. Governments have a political imperative to spend more money than they have. For thousands of years, they arranged for this by allowing money changers to create money out of thin air, some of which the government borrows. This always leads to the collapse of a country. Sometimes the country never recovers. Example, King Philip II of Spain. Some governments banned the money changers from the deleterious scheme, resulting in prosperity of their nation. Examples include Julius Caesar, King Henry I, Queen Elizabeth I, etc. In Europe, the Rothschilds kicked it up beginning around 1743. They financed Cecil Rhodes, enabling him to monopolize the rape of natural resources out of Africa. And they financed John D. Rockefeller in his monopolization of natural resources in the USA. And later, J.P. Morgan, Kun Lieb, etc. By 1840, the Rothschilds' money changers have full control of France. I need to take out my contacts. They're getting blurry. The privately owned Bank of England started raping the people with counterfeit money they were permitted to create out of thin air around 1694. The current privately owned Federal Reserve Bank officially started raping the U.S. in 1913. Fast forward to 1971, the U.S. government owed tons of money to the money changers, Fed, for their frivolous wars and demanded compensation. President Nixon satisfied the problem by taking the U.S. dollar, the world reserve currency, off the gold standard. Now the Fed could counterfeit all the money it wanted without any restraints. This allowed the U.S. government to pay for everything it wanted by using the Fed's phony money. European governments vehemently protested. The world was wildly out of balance. The British and French were the most vocal. France literally sent a warship to New York Harbor on August 15, 1971. Nixon told them all to piss off. The European Central Bankers, group of private money changers, decided they could bring the balance back, forming a European Union, and allowing themselves to likewise counterfeit money that wasn't backed by anything. This began to race the counterfeit money. European money changers versus U.S. money changers. This wasn't merely a moral dilemma, it rotted the entire apple from the inside out. Most of the counterfeit money winds up in the hands of elites. Workers are taxed heavily to pay the ever-occurring debts. History continues to allow these money changers this power over the creation of counterfeit money. The results are always the same in the end. Many, many bad things happened in the U.S. beginning in 1971. Real wages took a dive. The amount of lawyers exploded. Cost of living began to soar. Collapse of small businesses. Savings plummeted. Utility costs and fuel costs skyrocketed. Infrastructure became neglected. Subsequent generations became more impoverished. Federal debt grew logarithmically. Speculation traded accelerated. Massive growth in healthcare administration and costs, and so on. He left the article. Let me read it. The following webpage has many shocking and highly illustrated graphs to demonstrate the annihilation of the nation that began in earnest following Nixon's dropping of the metal standard in 1971. Wow, this guy made a whole freaking long-ass lecture for us, bruh. And he gave us an article. I've already read a lot, and this is long. It says, hold on, can y'all see this? Let me share. The Future of Freedom Foundation. This is the link he put on there. It says the National Security State Racket. Mad interesting to me. I was about to go to sleep and this just woke me up. Some people criticizing President Biden for the recent U.S. airstrikes in Syria, as well as his refusal to sanction Saudi dictator Mohammed bin Salman, the man who U.S. officials have concluded orchestrated the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Yes, it's possible that Biden made those decisions, but there is another possibility, one much more likely, one that unfortunately all too many Americans are loath to consider, that it was the U.S. national security establishment, particularly the Pentagon and the CIA, who made those decisions, and that Biden simply deferred to their judgment. That's what many people simply cannot bring themselves to consider, that it's the national security establishment, namely the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, and to a certain extent the FBI, that is actually running the federal government, especially in foreign affairs. The other three branches, while permitted to have the veneer of power, are expected to defer to critical judgments made by the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. That's fucking mad interesting, because that's basically kind of what the guy was saying in the video that we was watching. Especially since Bush Sr. got put in there because he was a CIA head of the CIA, and then he became the president. They said that was the first time that happened. I wonder if that really was the first time that happened. Now, somebody need to check that for me. And defer they do. When was the last time that Congress significantly reduced the budget for the national security establishment? You never see it. That's because the national security establishment controls Congress. No member of Congress, especially the military and CIA veterans, would dare to take them on. If he did, he would be toast because the Pentagon would immediately retaliate by threatening to close down military projects or bases in his district. The Pentagon's and CIA's assets in the mainstream press would immediately take the offensive and accuse the congressman of being ineffective. He will be out in the next election. The Supreme Court has long deferred to the overwhelming power of the national security branch of the federal government. Pentagon's and CIA's torture and prison center in Cuba, where people have been denied the right to speedy trial for more than a decade, is an ongoing testament of that deference to authority. Deference. Or deference. So is the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the Pentagon's and CIA's power to assassinate people, notwithstanding the express prohibitions on assassinating in the Fifth Amendment. Indeed, America's Official Secrets Act wasn't a law enacted by Congress. It was a judicial doctrine that the Supreme Court crafted out of the whole cloth in deference to a demand by the military. I don't really know what he's talking about there, but I a little bit know. Trump versus Biden. With the national security establishment decision that President Kennedy's policies pose a grave threat to national security and therefore that he needed to be removed from office, no president has dared to take these people on. In the run-up to the 2016 election, it appeared that Donald Trump was going to do so, but for some unknown reason, once he entered into office, he crumbled, surrounding himself with military generals and civilian warmongers. He also surrendered to the CIA's demands to keep its 50-year-old JFK assassination record secret on grounds of national security. But there is no doubt that Trump was different. He didn't show the same deference to the authority of the national security establishment that other presidents since Kennedy have. That was why the deep state went after him from the very beginning, especially when its nonsensical investigation into whether Trump was a Russian agent who was betraying America, just as they said Kennedy was doing with his policies. Perhaps with time, we will learn the full extent of deep state's efforts to ensure Joe Biden's defeat of Donald Trump in 2020 presidential election. Now they have Biden, which is their notion of an ideal president, one who will defer to the omnipotent power of the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. Did Biden really select military-industrial complex man Lloyd J. Austin III as Secretary of Defense? It's much more likely that the Pentagon was not wanting to jack with the civilian overseer, chose Austin, and that's Biden simply deferred to his wishes. That sounds probably right. Unheeded warnings. President Eisenhower warned about this type of government structure in his farewell address in 1961. He pointed out that it constituted a grave threat to the democratic process and rights and liberties of the American people. That was more than 50 years ago. Since then, the Pentagon, the CIA, NSA, and FBI, along with other army of contractors and subcontractors feeding at the public trough, have only grown progressively more powerful and rich. John Kennedy took these people on directly. Kennedy was not a dumb man. He knew precisely the nature of power structure he was up against. That was why he played an instrumental role in bringing the movie 7 Days in May into production, to serve as a warning to the American people, the same type of warning that Ike issued to Americans in his farewell address. The problem is that Americans never paid heed to those warnings. They just don't want to acknowledge that they had any validity. Indeed, any Americans still do not want to confront the fact that this brutal structure within the government apparatus ended up turning its omnipotent power inward against a president whose policies they deemed constituted a grave threat to national security. Are y'all saying that the CIA killed John F. K? It says milking the racket. From some 45 years, the national security establishment milked the war on communism for all it was worth, constantly engaging deep fear with the American people so that they would continue to vest the Pentagon, the CIA, and NSA and FBA with ever-increasing power, influence, and money. It was nothing more than one great big racket, one that continually year after year enriched the pockets and expanded the power of those in the military intelligence establishment. When Kennedy decided to bring an end to the Cold War racket, he had to be dealt with, and a message needed to be sent to the American people. We are here, we are in charge, never take us on, and just get used to it. Ooh. When the Cold War ended, the racket quickly morphed into the war on terrorism. All the fears about communism that these people engendered in the American war were simply switched to terrorism or Islam. At first, the fear revolved around the notion that foreign terrorists were coming to get us. Now it's morphed into the notion that domestic terrorists are coming to get us. They have now come full circle, restoring Russia and China as official enemies who are supposedly coming to get us, just like they supposedly were during the 45 years of the Cold War racket. It's now a fear-mongering perfect storm. Terrorists, Muslims, Russia, and China, and for good measure, Syria, North Korea, ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, drug dealers, illegal immigrants, and an unsafe world. And I would say domestic terrorism now. And upended values and morals. Ever since its inception, the deep state has upended American morals and values. How many foreign regimes, including democratically elected ones, have these people destroyed in the name of national security? How many brutal military and right-wing dictatorships have they installed into power, trained, supported, and aligned with? How many people, including the democratically elected U.S. president, have they assassinated over the years based on national security? Oh, they are saying it. They just went out and said it there. The obsessive quest to inflict extreme punishment on people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden says it all. Here are people who have done nothing more than disclose the truth about the national security establishment's evil and immoral actions. Yet it is people like Assange and Snowden who are considered to be evil and moral ones. What better evidence of an upending of American moral and values than that? If our American ancestors had been told that the Constitutional Convention was bringing into the existence a national security state type of government structure, they never would have approved the deal. The only reason they approved the deal was because they were assured that the Constitution was bringing into existence a limited government republic. The national security state is a root cause of many woes under which America is suffering. To get our nation back on the right road, it is necessary that we dismantle, not reform, the national security establishment and restore our founding government system of limited government republic to our land. Wow, that was really good. This post was written by Jacob G. Hornberger. Jacob G. Hornberger is founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. He was born and raised in Laredo, Texas, and received his bachelor's in economics from Virginia Military Institute and his law degree from University of Texas, UT. He was a trial attorney for 12 years in Texas. He also was a adjunct professor at the University of Dallas, where he taught law and economics. In 1987, Mr. Hornberger left the practice of law to become a director of programs at the Foundation for Economic Education. He has advanced freedom and free markets on talk radio stations all across the country, as well as on Fox News, Neil Cavuto, and Greta Van Susteren shows, as he appeared as a regular commentator on Judge Andrew Napolitano's show Freedom Watch. I thought he was a lefty. All these shows are right shows. But that shows we all agree, really, when it comes down to the freaking truth. I'm finna wrap it, y'all. Peace and love. Y'all have a good night. I hope y'all learned something. Be back tomorrow. Remember, we want you to be an activist. And don't take our word for it. Look that shit up. Pulley.